One of the biggest things that we always hear about in crypto is just how decentralized Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the savior for everything. Ditch TradFi, jump in on Bitcoin to escape the matrix, and all this nonsense that is always pushed by these Bitcoin maxis. In this video, I'm going to be outlining a lot of information that is actually going to shock most people out there that don't know a lot of this information. And I also am going to play a great video. It's a clip from a podcast where Whitney Webb is also talking about the same exact problem around Bitcoin and what most people don't even realize is happening. So welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, hopefully by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. If we take a quick look at this post going back to May 16th of this year from Cointelegraph, they said big miners pose a growing existential threat to Bitcoin. And this is regarding two major mining companies that controlled more than 50% of Bitcoin's hash rate power. That's two miners. If we go over here to blockchain.com, we could see the summary of mined blocks. And if we actually look at this, the top four miners here are controlling 77.53% of the mining control of Bitcoin, which is crazy. This is hash rate power, 77.53%. That is insane. So as we think about this, right? How decentralized is Bitcoin? Building upon this, there's two great posts by Smoke Dog over on X, and we have the centralization issue with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Pay attention. Neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum is as decentralized as many are led to believe. For instance, Bitcoin, as recently as 2023, only two mining pools controlled 51% of the network's computational power, which poses a serious risk of centralization and manipulation. And even outside of 2023, guys, this was 2024, May, just recently. This is currently. Ethereum in 2024, a few entities, Lido, Coinbase, Binance, controlled the majority of staking power. This concentration is dangerous because it gives disproportionate power to a small number of participants, which sets the stage for market manipulation and undermines the core principles of decentralization. These centralization risks go beyond simple market manipulation, presenting significant systemic risk to the integrity and reliability of these networks. The involvement of major institutions like DARPA and the analysis by Trail of Bits underscore the gravity of this issue. Retail investors should seriously consider these risks when participating in these networks. And here we have the full breakdown of this. In fact, it actually talks about how this is posing risk to investors. It can also be utilized to facilitate market manipulation. And this concentration problem likely goes deeper, as we are seeing from Trail of Bits, which is very interesting. Now, also over here, we have manipulation on the Ethereum network. In 2024, a report by the New York Federal Reserve Bank examined arbitrage activity on the Ethereum network. This is the practice of exploiting price differences across different markets or forms of an asset. Traders buy an asset in one market at a lower price and simultaneously sell it to another at a higher price, profiting from the difference. The report confirmed that certain entities on the Ethereum network control critical points to consolidate liquidity and maximize their own profits, often at the expense of small retail investors. Look beyond the surface of these major networks and you'll find that things aren't always as they seem. And here we actually have that full breakdown. And this is from the New York Federal Reserve Bank in 2024. Also, remember this chart? This is from September 13th of this year, top 13 Bitcoin holders. If we actually look at this, right, most of Bitcoin, in terms of the top 13 Bitcoin holders, are held by US-based companies. Could we essentially say that the US is the largest holder of Bitcoin? Technically, we can, because these are all tied back to Wall Street. We have the US government coming in at almost 2.5% of the supply, BlackRock coming in at 2.3%, which is 5% almost there, Fidelity 1.79%, Grayscale 1.67%, MicroStrategy 1.57%, and remember who is one of the largest shareholders of MicroStrategy? BlackRock. Then, of course, we have Block One, Kraken, Robinhood as well. Yes, a lot of these players are tied right back to Wall Street, but also the US government. which I find very, very interesting. Now, the top 13 control about 4.4 million or 28.39%. A large portion of that, obviously, yes, Satoshi's wallet, which we already talked about and speculated on who Satoshi actually is, or we should say, the group who is Satoshi, which could definitely be tied back to the government as well. But this is also concerning. And remember that the ETFs and the volume around them only continues to grow and grow and grow. Building upon this, remember back in 2021, there was a significant thread on X where Elon Musk was tagged, and he did say obnoxious threads like this make me want to go all in on Doge. Now, obviously, yes, at that time, Dogecoin was huge. It was getting pumped. But we have Bitcoin is actually highly centralized, with supermajority controlled by a handful of big mining, aka hashing companies. And yes, that is still true today. This was back in May of 2021. Then he gives us an example of a single coal mine that did flood in China, actually, and it was almost killing miners. Bitcoin's hash rate dropped 35%. He said, sounds decentralized to you? And yeah, I mean, it was proven back in 2021 that Bitcoin was controlled by Chinese miners. A large portion of it was China controlled, which is wild to me. Now, a lot of it is controlled by US based mining companies. 77%. 77% is controlled by 4 players on this list, which I just find insane to me. But when we think about this, it takes me to the video clip of Whitney Webb addressing this. And this was actually from a podcast, and it's TFTC episode 499. I have the video here. I went and edited it a little bit. It's about 4 minutes long. Listen closely to this. More specifically, listen to what she is telling you happening behind the scenes with Bitcoin.
And talking about this public-private play, it's important to keep in mind that what happens, I mean, just look at this, the Treasury Secretary office alone. So like in Clinton, it was Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs. He helps repeal Glass-Steagall. And then when that whole bubble pops in 2008, Goldman Sachs' Henry Paulson is Treasury of the Secretary. Then it's Tim Geithner, who worked under Larry Summers, and Robert Rubin is Treasury Secretary under Obama. And then it's Steve Mnuchin, who was involved in the 2008 financial crisis and whose dad was one of the top guys at Goldman Sachs, and he was also Goldman Sachs. So what they do when they're in power is that they create policies that help benefit them. They came from Goldman Sachs with intentions to implement policies that benefit Goldman Sachs, right? And so generally what happens is that when the private sector wants something, or they've created a big market for something, they've invested lots of money in creating something like the carbon market, and no one's using the carbon market. They are going to then use the public sector to force people to use the carbon market. And so they're trying to do that through the guise of climate emergency, right? And that's not working. So if that's not working, how will they go about and how will they do it? Well, like Mark and I have discussed before, they're trying to go about it the private sector route. Oh, okay, you guys aren't interested in programmable, surveillable money if it's emitted by the central bank. So if it's emitted by a private bank, maybe you will, right? But the other side of this is what's happening in places like Argentina right now, where people have lost so much of their purchasing power. So like before Milei came to power, I think the poverty rate was it was insanely high. I think it was something like 60%. And then Milei came into power and devalued the currency by 50%, which led to a massive loss in purchasing power for Argentinians on top of that. Now Argentinians are so desperate and are being told that they're undergoing quote unquote shock therapy designed by a JP Morgan guy, that they're doing WorldCoin. They're scanning their eyes in the Sam Altman orb for shit coins and a cattle tag, a digital ID. And the idea is to have that be like your access to the internet, and using, these tokens and these stable coins, using Tether, using USDC, whatever supported by Mercado Libre's giant entity, Mercado Pago, which is also integrated with Brazil's biggest crypto exchange, Mercado Bitcoin. And then there's Ripio in the mix, which is partnered with all of these guys too. They're going to control all the rails that stuff runs on. And that's where people are running because their money has been so devalued and they have no alternative. And I think that's ultimately the goal, is to get people on programmable, surveillable money by any means necessary. So if you won't do it because you're like, oh yeah, this is a way, I'm going to use JP Morgan coin and beat the Fed CBDC. If you're not going to get suckered into that, then, it seems like they'll use destabilization and desperation as a way to get people to onboard into the systems that they're creating. They're not just going to spend billions of dollars creating these systems and have no one use them. They're going to try and use, either desperation created by public sector policies or by private sector policies, and then have sort of like 2008. Oh, look, the private banks have destroyed the economy. Now we need the public sector to come in and rein them in. And I think also, I think Bitcoin is obviously very key to their plans, but they need Bitcoin to stay, as Larry Fink said, a technology for asset storage. They refuse to have it be a currency. And actually, Jeffrey Epstein gave an interview about Bitcoin that I didn't know about until maybe like a couple months ago when we started researching this. Oh yes. And he says the exact same thing Larry Fink says. It's not a currency. It's, a technology for asset storage. Well, I think it's important to say too that I think there's a lot of people in the Bitcoin media space that will never talk about this or what you just mentioned. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of money and effort has been put into specifically homogenizing media discourse in the Bitcoin space, because they want Bitcoiners as much as possible to be compliant, while Larry Fink and his ilk do what they want with Bitcoin and make it what they want it to be, so that people are content with number go up and sort of the Saylor-esque talking points that have gotten a lot of, a lot of people have heard those versus what you just mentioned, from example. There needs to be a cultural shift in Bitcoin in the opposite direction of what this Diego guy from Rootstock said, where he's like, we need to drop the whole, stop fiscal irresponsibility of the banks and central banks and, be a challenge and threat to their power. We have to drop that if we want to get rich. I mean, that's the mentality there. And I feel like the Saylor mentality really isn't that different from that. We have to push people in the other direction, because if we go in the direction they're pushing those, people to go in, people that want to drop the ethos or whatever and make Bitcoin just a tool for Wall Street. No, if we let that happen, very bad things happen, and there has to be a fight. And there's a specific effort that's been launched against people that hold Bitcoin to try and get them to be compliant in that sense. And that's through, controlling the discourse in the media space.
And she's 100% correct here. Listen, as we really think about a lot of the original Bitcoin holders, like for an example, Max Kaiser, back in October, he was parading around with the ETFs. He was celebrating the ETFs. He was also one celebrating the US government being one of the largest buyers of Bitcoin. If you guys do remember that, it was at the Bitcoin conference, and yeah, this wasn't really going to be anything crazy. Sure, it was just hype or so. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Was saying that he was going to sign an executive order for the U.S. to buy 550 Bitcoin a day until they hold a reserve of 4 million Bitcoin if elected president. But this event, it wasn't so much about the whole idea of the U.S. government buying Bitcoin. It was more so about the fact that we have Bitcoin maxis in the space. And a lot of the Bitcoin, media companies like Bitcoin Magazine or so, they celebrate this stuff. They love it because it's all about clicks. It's all about greed. Greed has taken over the original goal of Bitcoin. The original idea of Bitcoin is dead. It's done. It's no longer a thing. And I've outlined this so many times. I even said over here, like, I love the argument from Bitcoin maxis now around escaping CBDCs. It's simply by holding Bitcoin. Today's Bitcoin versus 2009 Bitcoin is extremely different. Not just, the whole idea of it. It's also the amount of holders. The entire environment around Bitcoin has changed as well. And I even said, I don't think the original idea of Bitcoin was celebrating and welcoming BlackRock to launch an ETF. Scared of being controlled by CBDCs, but not scared of a scarce asset that has practically priced retail out while one of the largest corporations file for a Bitcoin ETF. It makes zero sense to me. BlackRock owns the largest percentage of everything around you. Don't think they will own the largest percentage of Bitcoin either. Think again, Bitcoin will soon be corporation controlled, and I would argue that it already is. Because if we think about the mining companies, if we think about this list of companies that control large portions of Bitcoin, it's essentially Wall Street and corporation controlled. And just like Whitney Webb is saying over here, right? They are essentially seizing Bitcoin. They're essentially seizing Bitcoin through these ETFs. They're grabbing such a large portion of Bitcoin. I do question what's going to be happening, because these companies like BlackRock and Fidelity and these major ETF companies that we know are not great companies. We're talking about, how they control and how they manipulate. They are not here for retail. They don't care about retail. They don't care about, this space for good. They care about it for their own greed, their own control. It's all about control. But think about it. These ETF companies just continue to grow in size and percentage of control. So if we think about that, okay, Wall Street is already controlling 8.15%. When Wall Street controls a quarter, half, what are people going, what is the end goal here? What are people going to think? Well, just like Whitney Webb said, their end goal here is control. It's all about control and pushing and forcing things upon the retail sector. So as we think about Bitcoin, right, is today's Bitcoin really decentralized? is today's Bitcoin really as safe as everyone says it is? We hear Saylor, we hear all these Bitcoin maxis continue to push their nonsense, but they are playing a game. The same exact way that they claim that Bitcoin is property. Guess what? Property can be seized, currency cannot. So are we really trying to say that, Bitcoin is property and get it, labeled as such? Because if that is the case, I do believe that we are about to witness Bitcoin be seized from owners. Now you might be saying like, oh no, they can't do that, Cold Storage. There is ways that they are trying to implement to achieve their end goal. Think about what's been happening around AI. Think about what's been happening around crypto. Think about the, Operation Choke Point 2.0. They will choke people out. They will make sure that they have their control at the end of the day. And that's exactly what's happening right now. We need to stop embracing the control aspect just for greed. And you can clearly see it through these Bitcoin maxis, just like this post here. $220,000 short term in play because Bitcoin is about to become the world's monetary center because of these ETFs. That's the problem with Bitcoin, is individuals like Max Kaiser, who is a Bitcoin maxi, one of the original ones, but now they are pushing things like this just for greed. This is the biggest problem. And I do believe that it's going to lead to a serious issue as well, just like Whitney Webb is saying. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord down in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.